The transmission arrived at 3:47 a.m. Geneva time. Every screen on Earth flickered. Every radio crackled. Every device capable of receiving a signal displayed the same image. A massive reptilian face with 4 eyes and scales the color of dried blood. Humans of Earth. The creature spoke in perfect English. I am Supreme Commander Dralveth of the Varadi Dominion. You have 7 days to surrender your world. Refuse, and we will reduce your cities to ash. The transmission ended. Silence followed. 40 years ago, humanity had joined the Galactic Confederation. They were welcomed as a minor species with limited technology. Their fleet consisted of 12 frigates, small and outdated by galactic standards. Earth was considered unimportant, a backwater planet at the edge of explored space. The Varadi knew this. Everyone knew this. Ambassador Ruth Okonkwo stood in her office at Confederation Station, 400 light years from Earth. She was 53 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and a face that had learned long ago to hide its emotions. Around her, alien diplomats whispered in 100 languages. The Confederation cannot intervene, the High Chancellor announced. He was a tall creature with blue skin and 6 arms, and he spoke without looking at Ruth. Earth is not strategically significant. We will not risk war with the Varadi over one minor world. Ruth did not argue. There was no point. She simply bowed, turned, and walked away. On Earth, panic spread like fire. The Varadi had conquered 43 worlds. Their fleet of 200 warships was already entering the Sol system. Videos of destroyed cities from their previous conquests played on every news channel. World leaders gathered in emergency session. Generals argued about defense strategies that everyone knew were useless. 12 frigates against 200 warships. The math was simple and brutal, but beneath the Swiss Alps, in a bunker that appeared on no map, a different meeting was taking place. 12 people sat around a circular table. They came from different countries, different backgrounds, different careers. A factory owner from Germany, a retired admiral from Nigeria, a physicist from India, a farmer from Brazil. They had never met publicly. Most governments did not know they existed. Director Samuel Adeyemi, a tall man with white hair and calm eyes, stood at the head of the table. He was 81 years old. He had been waiting for this moment for 30 years. The vote, he said quietly. One by one. Each person at the table pressed a button. Green lights appeared on the display. 12 votes. 12 green lights. Unanimous, Samuel nodded slowly. Activate Protocol Prometheus. Deep beneath the Sahara Desert, lights flickered on in tunnels that stretched for miles. In the Pacific Ocean, near the Mariana Trench, massive doors began to open. Across 6 continents, facilities that had operated in secret for decades received the same coded message. Wake up. Ambassador Ruth Okonkwo's shuttle landed in Geneva 16 hours later. She expected to be taken to the United Nations building. Instead, a black car drove her to a private airfield. Then a helicopter carried her into the mountains. The bunker was cold and clean. Samuel Adeyemi met her at the entrance. Ambassador, he said, thank you for coming. I don't understand, Ruth replied. What is this place? Who are you? Samuel smiled. It was a sad smile, the smile of a man carrying a heavy secret. 40 years ago, humanity announced that we had discovered faster than light travel. We said it was new technology. We said we were beginners, just learning to explore the stars. He paused. That was a lie. Ruth stared at him. We discovered FTL 120 years ago, Samuel continued. We've been watching the galaxy ever since. Studying, learning, and building. He led her down a long corridor. Screens lined the walls, showing images that made no sense. Massive structures hidden underground. Fleets of ships in secret shipyards. Weapons systems being tested on distant moons. We joined the Confederation as a minor species because we needed information, Samuel explained. We needed to understand who was dangerous, who could be trusted, who might someday threaten us. We needed time to prepare. They reached a large door. Samuel placed his hand on a scanner, and it slid open. Beyond was a command center filled with hundreds of people working at stations. Giant screens covered the walls. One screen showed a map of the Sol system with the Varadi fleet marked in red. Another showed Earth itself, with 7 locations pulsing with green light. Prepare for what? Ruth whispered. Samuel pointed at the green dots on the map. For the day someone tried to take our home. He looked at her with eyes that burned with quiet fire. Ambassador, the masquerade is over. It's time for Earth to wake up. Somewhere deep underground, metal groaned. Engines that had been dormant for decades began to hum. Sand shifted in the desert. Water churned in the ocean. The Verati had 7 days to conquer Earth. They had no idea what was coming. 200 warships hung in the darkness beyond Neptune. Each one was massive, covered in spikes and weapons that had burned cities across 43 worlds. The Verati painted their kills on their hulls. Some ships had so many marks that they looked like they were covered in strange writing. Supreme Commander Dralveth stood in his command chamber, watching Earth through long-range sensors. It was a blue and green world, fragile and small. His 4 eyes narrowed with contempt. "Their fleet?" he asked. 12 frigates, Supreme Commander," his officer replied. "They have gathered near their moon. They are pathetic." Dralveth made a sound like grinding rocks. It was laughter. The Verati had never lost a war. They were bred for conquest. Their scales could stop bullets. Their claws could tear through metal. They lived for battle and died with honor. A species like humanity, soft and weak, was barely worth the fuel it would cost to reach their world. "They will surrender," Dralveth said. "They always do. And if they don't, we will make an example of them." On Earth, things were changing. In Detroit, factory workers arrived for their morning shift and found military police waiting at the gates. "Facility is closed for the week," the soldiers announced. "National security. You will be paid for your time." The workers complained, but they left. They did not see the trucks arriving after they were gone. They did not see the equipment being loaded into elevators that went down, down, down into tunnels that weren't supposed to exist. In the Pacific Ocean, fishing boats were turned away from waters they had fished for generations. "Military exercise," the Coast Guard said. But there were no ships visible. Just empty ocean and, sometimes, strange lights beneath the waves. In the Sahara Desert, 1,000 square miles of sand was blocked off. Satellites showed military vehicles from 12 different countries working together. France and Algeria, Egypt and Chad. Old enemies cooperating without a single public announcement. Ambassador Ruth Okonkwo walked through the bunker beneath the Alps. Her mind was still trying to accept what she had learned. 120 years of secrets. An entire shadow government operating behind the scenes. Everything she knew about Earth's place in the galaxy was wrong. Director Samuel Adeyemi walked beside her, explaining. "The Confederation has existed for 12,000 years, he said. In that time, they have watched hundreds of species join and fail. The weak are conquered. The strong are contained. Nobody is ever truly equal. So we pretended to be weak," Ruth said. "We pretended to be harmless," Samuel corrected. "A minor species with outdated ships and simple technology. Not worth watching. Not worth worrying about." He stopped at a large window. Beyond it, Ruth could see a massive chamber carved from rock. Workers moved around something enormous, something covered in scaffolding and cables. "While the galaxy ignored us, we built," Samuel continued. "We placed listening posts throughout Confederation space. We studied every major power. We learned their weaknesses, their strategies, their secrets." He paused. "And we prepared for the day someone would come for us." "The Verati," Ruth said. "It could have been anyone. The Verati are simply the first." Samuel looked at her. "Ambassador, I need you to understand something. What you will see in the next few days, what you will be asked to do, it will change everything. Earth will never be able to hide again." "I understand," Ruth said, though she wasn't sure she did. Across the planet, the preparations accelerated. On day 3, the Verati fleet passed Jupiter. Their scanners showed nothing unusual on Earth. Just cities, just farms, just frightened humans waiting to surrender. They did not skin deep enough that in the Sahara, the ground began to vibrate. Workers evacuated to safe distances. Cameras recorded everything. Though the footage would not be released for months, in the Pacific, the water churned. Fish fled in every direction. Whales sang confused songs and swam away from areas they had inhabited for centuries. In Antarctica, in Australia, in Siberia, in Canada, the same signs appeared. Energy signatures that made no sense. Seismic activity that followed no natural pattern. Something was waking up. On day 4, the Verati Supreme Commander received a report from his intelligence officer. "Unusual energy readings from the planet's surface," the officer said. Source unknown. Dralveth dismissed it. Human power plants. Their technology is primitive. It is nothing. The officer hesitated. The readings are very large, Supreme Commander. Irrelevant. Dralveth waved a clawed hand. Continue the approach. We attack on day 7. He did not give the readings another thought. His arrogance had served him well for 60 years of war, but far away, under miles of sand and rock and water, machines that humanity had spent a century building were finally coming to life. Reactors powered up. Systems activated. Crews took their positions. The Varati thought they were hunting prey. They were about to learn the truth. Day 5 began with an earthquake that wasn't an earthquake. Seismologists around the world stared at their screens in confusion. The readings made no sense. The shaking wasn't coming from tectonic plates. It was coming from above them. From something moving through solid rock. In the Sahara Desert, the sand started to fall. First it was small. A dune collapsed here. A crack appeared there. Then the cracks spread, connecting like spider webs across the landscape. Sand poured into the gaps like water draining from a bathtub. Satellites watched from orbit. News channels, blocked from approaching the zone, used telephoto lenses from 50 miles away. What they captured would be played billions of times in the coming days. The desert opened. A canyon appeared where there had been flat ground. It grew wider, longer, deeper. Sand cascaded into darkness. And then, from that darkness, something rose, metal, gray and scarred, and impossibly vast. It climbed out of the earth like a creature emerging from its egg. Dust and rock fell from its surface in avalanches. Lights flickered along its hull, waking up in sequence, spreading from bow to stern. The Prometheus rose from the Sahara. She was 17 kilometers long. Her hull was thick with armor that had taken 30 years to manufacture. Her weapon systems had been designed by engineers who never knew what they were building. Her flight decks could launch 400 squadrons of fighters. Her crew numbered 12,000, trained in secret facilities that the world had believed were research stations. She rose slowly, majestically, impossibly. The sound of her engines filled the sky for 100 miles. Sand blasted away from her ascent in a storm that blocked the sun, and she was not alone. 3,000 miles away, the Pacific Ocean exploded. Water shot into the air in a column a mile wide. Ships at sea were thrown by waves that came from nowhere. And from the depths, where humans had supposedly only built deep-sea research facilities, the Leviathan emerged. She was 15 kilometers long, sleek where the Prometheus was broad. Her hull was dark blue, almost black, designed to hide in the void between stars. She carried weapons that had no names in any galactic database. Her shields were strong enough to survive flying through a star's corona. She rose from the ocean, water streaming from her hull like a waterfall in reverse. Her engines glowed white-hot as she climbed toward the sky to Antarctica. The ice cracked and fell away. The Fenrir emerged, 12 kilometers of gray steel built to operate in the coldest environments the universe could offer. In the Australian outback, the Titan rose from beneath red rock that had hidden her for 40 years. In the Siberian wilderness, the Ragnarok emerged, her hull covered in ice that melted and steamed in the heat of her engines. In the Canadian North, the Valkyrie rose. And in the mountains of South America, the Sentinel followed. 7 supercarriers. 7 weapons that humanity had built in secret while the galaxy looked the other way. On the Varati command ship, chaos erupted. Recalibrate the sensors. Supreme Commander Dralveth shouted. This is impossible. Sensors are functioning correctly, Supreme Commander, his officer replied. His voice was shaking. 7 vessels, each between 12 and 17 kilometers in length. Combined firepower exceeds our entire fleet by a factor of what? The officer looked at his commander with all 4 eyes wide with fear. 43, Supreme Commander. Their firepower exceeds ours 43 times over. Dralveth stared at the screens. 7 shapes now orbited Earth, visible even from Neptune. They had come from nowhere. They had been hidden under rock and water and ice for decades, perhaps centuries. He had brought 200 ships to conquer a defenseless world. The world was not defenseless. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Ambassador Ruth Okonkwo stood before a camera. She wore the same diplomatic uniform she had worn at Confederation Station, the same calm expression. But her eyes were different now. Harder, prouder, To the Galactic Confederation, she said. To the Varadi Dominion. To all who are watching. Earth was never what we pretended to be. We watched. We learned. We prepared. She paused. The Varadi have demanded our surrender. Our answer is no. Our answer will always be no. Earth protects its own. We have no interest in conquest. But we will never be conquered. She smiled, just slightly. To the Varadi fleet. You have 24 hours to withdraw from our system. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, the message spread. Species that had never given humanity a second thought now scrambled to understand what they had just witnessed. 7 supercarriers, hidden for over a century, from a species they had dismissed as primitive farmers. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. Confederation Station was the largest structure in the known galaxy. Home to millions of beings from hundreds of species, it served as the political heart of civilized space. In 12,000 years, it had seen empires rise and fall. It had witnessed wars that burned across star systems. It had never seen anything like this. The message from Earth played on every screen, in every language, in every corner of the station. Species that had never agreed on anything stood together in stunned silence, watching the 7 carriers orbit a world they had dismissed as unimportant. High Chancellor Vorthax summoned an emergency session of the Council. Representatives from the most powerful species in the galaxy gathered in the Great Chamber. They were angry. They were confused. They were afraid. How? Demanded the representative from the Kalari hegemony. Our intelligence services have monitored Earth for 40 years. We saw nothing. Because there was nothing to see, said the representative from the Sherval Collective. They hid everything underground, underwater, under ice. They never tested their weapons in space where our sensors could detect them. They played us for fools, someone hissed. The room erupted in arguments. Accusations flew between species that had been rivals for millennia. Everyone blamed everyone else. Everyone demanded answers that no one had. High Chancellor Vorthax raised his 6 arms for silence. The question, he said slowly, is not how this happened. The question is what we do now. No one had an answer. In the Sol system, the Varadi fleet had stopped advancing. Supreme Commander Dralveth stood alone in his quarters, staring at tactical projections that he had reviewed 100 times. 200 warships against 7 carriers. On paper, his numbers were superior. In reality, the human ships were larger, better armed, and completely unknown. The Varadi had built their empire on one principle: never retreat. In 3,000 years, they had never withdrawn from a fight. Their honor demanded victory or death, but Dralveth was not a fool. He was a conqueror, yes. A warrior, certainly. But he had not survived 60 years of war by ignoring impossible odds. He opened a communication channel. Human vessels. This is Supreme Commander Dralveth. I wish to speak with your leader. The response came immediately. A woman's face appeared on his screen. Dark skin, gray hair, eyes like stone. I am Ambassador Ruth Okonkwo, she said. I speak for Earth. Ambassador. Dralveth forced his voice to remain calm. Your ships are impressive, but the Varadi do not surrender. We do not retreat. Our honor forbids it. Then your honor will kill you, Ruth replied simply. We do not want war, Supreme Commander. We never did. But we will not allow anyone to threaten our home. You have been lying to the galaxy for over a century. Yes. Ruth did not hesitate. We have, and we would do it again. Dralveth studied her face. He saw no fear, no doubt. This was a species that had planned for this moment since before he was born. They had watched. They had waited. They had built weapons in secret while pretending to be helpless. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. Why, he asked. Why hide for so long? Ruth was silent for a moment. Because the galaxy is dangerous, she finally said. Because we are a young species, and young species do not survive by announcing their strength. They survive by being underestimated, by being ignored, by preparing for threats that haven't arrived yet. She leaned forward. The Varadi were always going to come. If not you, someone else. Some empire that saw an easy target. Some power that wanted our resources, our world, our people. Her voice hardened. We decided, 100 years ago, that when that day came, we would be ready. Dralveth said nothing. You have 20 hours remaining, Ruth continued. Withdraw from our system, and this ends peacefully. Stay. and we will defend ourselves. There is no third option. The transmission ended. Dralveth stood in silence for a long time. He thought about honor. He thought about duty. He thought about the 43 worlds he had conquered, the millions of lives he had ended in the name of the Dominion. He thought about his children, back on the homeworld. His grandchildren who had never seen war. Honor demanded that he fight. Logic demanded that he survive. In the end, he made his choice. All ships, he announced over the fleet channel. Prepare for battle. We attack at dawn. The channel erupted in war cries. The Vorati were ready to die with honor. On the Prometheus, Ruth Okonkwo received the report. The enemy fleet was advancing. So be it, she said quietly. She turned to the communications officer. Signal the fleet. All carriers to battle stations. 7 carriers moved into formation. Fighters launched from their decks, filling the space around Earth with thousands of small, deadly shapes. The Vorati wanted a fight. Humanity was about to give them one they would never forget. The first shot came from the Vorati flagship at exactly 0600 hours, Earth Standard Time. A beam of pure energy lanced across the void, bright enough to be seen from Earth's surface. It struck the Prometheus amidships, a blow that would have vaporized any Confederation vessel. The shields held. Blue light rippled across the carrier's hull as the energy dispersed. The Prometheus did not even slow down. She continued forward, steady and unstoppable, like a mountain learning to walk. Then she fired back. The weapon had no official name. The engineers who built it called it the Hammer. It was a directed energy system that compressed matter into a beam thinner than a hair and hotter than a star's core. It crossed the distance between the fleets in less than a second. The Vorati cruiser it struck simply stopped existing. One moment it was there, 2 kilometers of armor and weapons. The next moment there was only expanding gas and debris. The battle had begun. 200 Vorati ships surged forward, their weapons blazing. They were warriors, every one of them. They had conquered worlds. They had broken empires. They did not know how to be afraid. 7 carriers met them. The Leviathan's weapons carved through the enemy formation like knives through paper. The Fenrir launched missiles that tracked targets through dimensions that Vorati sensors couldn't detect. The Titan's electronic warfare systems turned enemy ships against each other, their weapons suddenly firing on their own fleet. Fighters swarmed between the giants. Human pilots who had trained in secret for decades finally had their chance to fight. They were outnumbered but never outmatched. Their ships were faster, their weapons sharper, their tactics unlike anything the Vorati had ever faced. Supreme Commander Dralveth watched his fleet die. Ship after ship vanished from his tactical display. Cruisers that had survived 100 battles were destroyed in seconds. Fighters that had terrorized entire systems were swatted from the sky like insects. All ships, concentrate fire on the lead carrier. He ordered. 50 vessels turned their weapons on the Prometheus. Beams and missiles and kinetic rounds struck her shields in a storm of destruction that should have overwhelmed any defense. The shields held. The Prometheus responded with a broadside that crippled 15 ships in a single salvo. Her guns tracked and fired faster than any living gunner could manage. Her defensive systems shot down incoming missiles before they got within 1,000 kilometers. 30 minutes into the battle, the Vorati had lost half their fleet. The humans had not lost a single ship. Dralveth understood, finally, what they had attacked. This was not a minor species with outdated technology. This was a civilization that had spent a century preparing for war. Every system, every weapon, every tactic had been designed specifically to defeat enemies like the Vorati. Earth had been waiting for them. All ships retreat, Dralveth ordered. His voice was hoarse. Honor be damned. His people would not die for nothing. But it was too late. The human fleet had surrounded them. Carriers blocked every escape route. Fighters harried any ship that tried to run. The trap had been sprung from the moment the Vorati entered the Sol system. Surrender. Ambassador Ruth Okonkwo's voice crackled over every Vorati channel. Power down your weapons and surrender. This is your final chance. For a long moment, no one responded. Then, slowly, Vorati ships began to power down. Weapons went cold. Engines went silent. The proud warriors of the Dominion, undefeated for 3,000 years, surrendered to a species they had planned to enslave. When it was over, only 47 Vorati ships remained operational. The rest were debris, slowly spreading through the void. Not a single human vessel had been lost. Not a single carrier had taken significant damage. The battle had lasted 47 minutes. The Prometheus broadcast a message to the galaxy. It was simple, short, and devastating. Earth protects its own. We have no interest in conquest. But we will never be conquered. Let this serve as a warning to all who would threaten us. On Confederation Station, the message played in perfect silence. N01 spoke. No one moved. 12,000 years of galactic politics had just been rewritten in less than an hour. A species they had ignored, dismissed, pitted, had just defeated one of the most powerful military forces in known space. And they had done it easily. High Chancellor Vorthax stared at the screens, his 6 arms hanging limp at his sides. "What have we done?" he whispered. N01 had an answer. But across the galaxy, in small corners and quiet worlds, other species watched the broadcast with different eyes. Species that had been conquered, oppressed, forgotten. Species that had never had a protector. They watched humanity's victory, and for the first time in generations, they felt something strange. They felt hope. 3 months after the battle, Ambassador Ruth Okonkwo returned to Confederation Station. The last time she had walked these halls, diplomats had looked through her like she wasn't there. Earth was unimportant. Humans were primitive. She had been tolerated, not respected. Now, every being she passed stopped to stare. Some bowed. Some stepped aside. Some simply watched with expressions she couldn't read, mixtures of fear and wonder, and something that might have been respect. The Galactic Council chamber was full when she entered. Every major species was represented. Thousands of eyes, in every color imaginable, turned to watch the human take her seat. High Chancellor Vorthax spoke first. His voice was careful, measured. "Ambassador Okonkwo, Earth has requested to address the Council. The floor is yours." Ruth stood. She had prepared this speech for weeks, but the words came easily now. "For 40 years, humanity pretended to be weak," she began. "We let you believe we were harmless. We let you ignore us. We did this for one simple reason. We did not trust you." The chamber stirred, but no one interrupted. The Confederation is 12,000 years old. In that time, you have watched young species rise and fall. Some were conquered by empires like the Varadi. Some were betrayed by allies they trusted. Some were simply forgotten. Ruth paused. "We decided, when we first made contact, that we would not be any of those species." She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes that had never noticed her before. "We built our carriers in secret. We placed listening posts throughout your space. We studied every major power. We learned your strengths, your weaknesses, your histories." She allowed herself a small smile. "We probably know more about some of your governments than you know about yourselves." Uncomfortable silence followed. "But we did not do this to threaten you," Ruth continued. "We did it to protect ourselves. And now, we want to use what we built to protect others." She activated a holographic display. A map of the galaxy appeared, with hundreds of worlds highlighted in blue. These are worlds that have been conquered, oppressed, or abandoned. Small species that the Confederation deemed not strategically significant. Peoples who have no one to defend them. The map shifted, showing the 7 carriers in orbit around Earth. "We are proposing a new alliance. Not under Confederation control. Not led by any single power. An alliance of equals, where every member has a voice and every world is protected." She turned back to face the Council. "Earth will defend any world that joins us. Our carriers will patrol their space. Our soldiers will fight for them. In return, they agree to treat each other with respect and fairness." She paused. "We call it the Terran Alliance." The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted in a dozen languages. Some demanded to know how Earth dared challenge Confederation authority. Others asked about the alliance's terms. Still others simply sat in silence, processing what they had heard. High Chancellor Vorthax raised his arms for quiet. "Ambassador," he said carefully, "what you propose would divide the galaxy." "The galaxy is already divided," Ruth replied. "It's divided between those who have power and those who don't. Between those who are protected and those who are prey. We're simply offering the prey a choice." She looked at the smaller delegations, the representatives from worlds that never spoke in council sessions because no one listened to them anyway. "Any world that wishes to join the Terran Alliance is welcome. We ask nothing in return except mutual defense and basic decency." 1 year later, the Alliance had 200 member worlds. Some were former Confederation members who left to join. Others were independent worlds that had never felt safe before. A few were refugee populations, species whose homeworlds had been destroyed by conquerors like the Virati. The seven carriers patrolled Alliance space constantly. Their presence alone deterred aggression. No one wanted to test humanity's weapons again. Ambassador Ruth Okonkwo stood on the observation deck of the Prometheus, watching a convoy of refugee ships dock at the New Earth station. They were Velkari, a species whose world had been conquered by the Virati decades ago. For years, they had drifted through space, homeless and afraid. Now they had a place to stay. Now they had protectors. Director Samuel Adeyemi joined her at the window. He was 82 now, his hair completely white, but his eyes were still sharp. Was it worth it, he asked. A century of hiding. A century of lies. Ruth watched the Velkari refugees step off their ships. Human aid workers greeted them with blankets, food, translation devices. Children who had never known safety looked around with wide eyes at the station that would become their new home. Every day, Ruth said quietly. Every single day. Below them, a little Velkari girl accepted a cup of warm soup from a human volunteer. She looked up at the observation deck, perhaps seeing movement in the window. She waved, just once, a tiny gesture of thanks. Ruth waved back. The galaxy had thought humanity was weak. They had thought humans were primitive, harmless, unimportant. They had been wrong. And now, finally, Earth was exactly what it had always wanted to be, a shield for those who could not protect themselves. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again.